Okay, yeah, so today we will have A, B, and C all together. However, C today is not going to be a person. C is actually going to stand for computer. Okay, but still C. Okay, so now today's situation is A and B are trying to use some kind of a website. For whatever reason, they need it. Okay, but let's just say whatever they're doing, in order to do it, yeah, their information has to be registered into their database. Okay, so, well, B is going to first check that. Okay, is my information registered? Okay, so that information consists of things like your name, your phone number, and your address. Okay, so B is typing all of those things in to see if he is registered. Okay, now, in this type of a situation, in Korean, if, let's say, you typed in your information wrong, then, yes, a lot of times you would see something saying the information does not accord. Okay, so that's what B will see on the screen of the computer. So once again, C stands for computer today. So that's the situation. Now, before we start, I'm sorry, I will be right back with some new markers that I bought today. Sophia, 감사합니다. Thank you for the donut. 도넛 감사합니다. Okay, yeah, I'll be right back. Okay, new markers. 타타, 타타, 감사합니다. 안녕하세요. Yes, new markers. Give me a second. I hope they work because sometimes new markers seems like they need some time to warm up. Tata, thank you. Chung, thank you for the sparkling star. Thank you. Okay, so well, thank you, thank you. 종꽃 감사합니다. Okay, so once again, yes. Now, the computer, B will see, something on the screen of the computer. Okay, so we did look into similar situations before, and I said, yes, usually when you're using some kind of a website on a computer or whatever it may be on your phone. Now, if you're using a website that is designed to provide service for the public, yes, of course, there is nothing more professional than that, right? So any kind of guidance that you get online will usually be in professional Korean. So therefore, yes, B is looking at something that he is seeing on a screen of a computer when he is trying to use some kind of a website. So it's going to be said in professional Korean. Therefore, yes, you can see it when you're doing anything online, but you shouldn't speak like this. And moreover, the format will also be in honorifics version number 1, a way of speaking in which your sentences end with nida or nika. It is not usually used for spoken Korean, right? But once again, this is not spoken Korean. Yes, we're seeing something online, therefore it's professional Korean. Okay, so once again, today C stands for computer, not a living being. So it says, yeah, B types in his information, but I guess something went wrong. Maybe there was a typo. Maybe he typed in the wrong information. The computer says, it says on the computer screen, the information does not accord. Just say doesn't accord. Okay, so of course, no us and thus, no articles. We have the subject information, and we're going to say don't accord, doesn't accord, the verb. Okay, so yes, let's first start with the subject, of course, information, 정보. Okay, now usually, if I am speaking spoken Korean, of course, I am not going to give the subject a subject particle just because it is the subject. Of course not. But we are not speaking spoken Korean. We are not playing that game. We're playing a different game called professional Korean, right? So rules apply differently. Yes, I will give the subject a subject particle just because it is a subject, because I'm speaking professional Korean right now. Okay, so it's just like baseball and basketball. Rules apply differently. So now I'm just going to place a subject particle just because I can. Okay, because we are playing the game called professional Korean. Okay, 정보가, 정보가, 정보가. Okay, so you always have to be ready for that shift of mindset whenever the format changes. You can't say, hey, why did you kick the basketball? You can't do that. No, you can, because we are playing a different game. So always be ready for that shift of mindset. Okay, so 정보가. And then now let's talk about once again the the three methods when it comes to placing don't in front of a verb. Okay, so we have been talking about it a couple of times, right? So, oops, sorry about that. So don't plus verb. Okay, so usually we more so focused on honorifics version number 2, right? A way of speaking in which your sentences end with you. Okay, so within the format of honorifics version number 2, what were the three methods? Method number 1, place an, and then place the verb, and then inflect it into any kind of a form you need. And then number 2, placing the verb and giving it the 지 않아요 ending. Okay, and number 3, placing the verb and giving it the 지 마요 ending. Okay, so you always have to know when to use which, right? Am I going to use method number 1, 2, or 3? Okay, so now, functionally speaking, 1 and 2 are the same. It's just that 지 않아요 is usually too poetic. It's the poetic trap. Of course, there are very rare exceptions in which you can use number 2 without sounding poetic. But usually, number 2 is the poetic trap. Therefore, I advise you to use method number 1, right? Okay, so method number 3 is functionally completely in its own lane, right? Number 3 is the version that you use when you are telling someone not to do something. Hey, don't do that. Okay, so what's always the example that I use to show you what could happen if you use the wrong version? Let's say once again, kids are running around in a swimming pool, around a swimming pool. That's dangerous, right? 위험해요. Okay, so I'm the adult here. So, yeah, I should take care of these kids. So I'm gonna tell the kids, hey, don't run. It's slippery. 위험해요. It's dangerous. 위험해요. Don't run. So let's say I know this version of don't. So let's say I said 안 뛰어요. Now the kids will look at me very confused or very annoyed because right now I'm saying I don't run. So the kids would look at me very confused, saying, huh? We never asked you to run with us. Why are you suddenly saying that? Leave us alone. Oh my god, that annoying adult who always wants to join. Yeah. Okay. So that's what you're saying. So therefore I should have said 뛰지 마요. Okay, so you always have to know when to use which. And once again, method number 2, usually a poetic trap. Okay, so the question is, now this is honorifics version number 2, right? A way of speaking in which your sentences end with you. Now, does that apply to honorifics version number 1, a way of speaking in which your sentences end with 니다 or 니까? Yes, it does. However, now technically it does, but sorry. 안 verb, yeah, method number 1. Method number 2, yeah, verb 지 않습니다. Verb 지 마십시오 or yeah. Sorry. Or 지 마시오. Okay, so yes, it applies to honorifics version number 1 as well. Okay, so however, there is a little bit of a difference. Now, I said in honorifics version number 1, because you are speaking a format of Korean that is actually used in spoken Korean, you have to be very careful of traps, like poetic traps, things that don't work in spoken Korean. However, in this case, now, honorifics version number 1 is not used for spoken Korean anyway. So actually, method number 2 that used to be something that you should avoid in spoken Korean. Actually, if you change the format into honorifics version number 1, now it is actually something that you can use, and not only is it that you can use it, it's actually even better to use it. So for example, if I'm switching from honorifics version number 1 to 2 because I'm trying to be professional, well actually method number 2 makes you sound a little bit more professional. Okay, does that make sense? So you always have to be careful. Once you change the format, rules apply differently. In this case, in spoken Korean, method number 2, a big no-no. But yes, in honorifics version number 1, that is, now you changed the format for some kind of a reason, either because you're speaking poetic Korean, professional Korean, or soldier Korean, or sometimes playful Korean. So right now, rules now apply completely differently. Now I can use method number 2. Actually, method number 2 is even better. Okay, so I'm going to go with method number 2 this time, because once again, right now, the first sentence that we are building is not in spoken Korean. Okay, and once again, 지 않습니다 is a no route ending, right? Thank you, 감사합니다. Thank you. Okay, so accord, 일치하다. Now, of course, I'm not going to give the H and H sound, right? Once again, an H in the middle, somewhere in the middle of a word, practically silent. So I'm not going to say 일치하다, I'm going to say 일치하다. Okay, and once again, I said the version of don't that we will use is a no route ending, which means all I have to do is remove 다, and then I can immediately attach it. 일치하지 않습니다. Don't, of course, doesn't as well. Accord. Okay, so yes, B is trying to type in his information to see whether he is registered in this database. However, the website says the computer, C stands for computer today, it says, oh, the information does not accord. 정보가 일치하지 않습니다. 정보가 일치하지 않습니다. 정보가 일치하지 않습니다. Okay, once again, don't speak like this. The only reason why I am building a sentence like this is because you're looking at something online, on the screen. So it's usually professional Korean. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Should we move on? Okay. Now let's move on. So, now, let's take a look into what went wrong. Something went wrong. That's why the information does not accord. So, it turns out that, once again, I said the information that B has to type in. So I guess B is filling out some kind of a form online. The information that B had to type in was his name, his phone number, and address. Okay, so today, something went wrong with the address. Okay, so, and And B knows actually exactly what he did as a mistake. So B is going to tell A, who is standing right next to him, and we're going to use a 다리, a bridge. The reason why B was confused, he got his own address wrong, is because he recently moved. Actually, last year he moved. Okay, so B is going to say, I moved last year. So it's not yesterday, actually. Yeah, some time has passed, but it is still confusing. Yeah, I still sometimes type in my old address. Okay, so this is how you would say it in 한국어. Okay, so yeah, the first thing that you have to do when you see a bridge is to identify whether it's a reverse bridge or not, right? And yes, most bridges will be reverse bridges, but is not. Okay, so but is just going to be a regular bridge, right? So we're going to go by the same order. If we had a reverse bridge, we would have had the order between the blue and pink sentence reversed, right? But not right now. Okay, so let's start with the blue 문장, cross the 다리, and then go to the pink 문장. Okay, so of course B is talking about I. Yeah, you were typing in your address. Of course I'm talking about I. And the verb move. And then last year time. And then the second thing that you have to keep in mind whenever you see a bridge is the fact that, yes, a bridge is never an independent standalone, right? It has to become a part of the word right in front of it as its ending. Therefore, we're going to give it to move. Okay, so now let's first start with last year. Okay, 작년. I'm sorry. 작년, last year. Okay, however, now when you're placing in or on or at with a time word, like on the weekend, in summer, or at 4 p.m. Now, when you're doing something like that, yes, in Korean also, 에 can do that, right? Of course, there are a lot of ways of doing it, but 에 can do that. Okay, now, there are some things that you do have to keep in mind. Yes, sometimes you can place in, on, at with time, any kind of a time word that indicates period of time or duration of time, right? Like in summer, on Thursday, at 4 p.m. Okay, but also in English, there are some time words that don't even allow you to place in, on, at usually, right? For example, yesterday. You wouldn't say, I arrived on yesterday, right? You would just say, I arrived yesterday. Or, like every day. I'm not going to say something like, oh, I go to that park in every day. No, I would just say, oh, I go to the park every day. Okay, so usually, if you have one of those words in English that does not even allow you to place in, on, at, well, usually it's the same in Korean. If you feel like I'm using a time word and I will not place in, on, at with it in English, usually then you don't give ed to it in Korean either. The list of those time words look exactly the same, usually that is, in both languages. That's why whenever we said like today here, 오늘, we never said 오늘에. That's just like saying, let's go on today in English. Okay, but for now, the only variable that you have to keep in mind is when you have last, this, or next with a time word. In English, usually, if you have last, this, or next with a time word, they will get rid of substitute in, on, at, right? You wouldn't say something like, oh, don't worry, I will go in next year. You wouldn't say that, right? I'm just going to say, I'll go next year. Or, I arrived last winter. I'm not going to say, I arrived in last winter. I'm just going to say, last winter. I arrived last winter. But in Korean, yes, even if you have last, this, or next with a time word, you still have to say in, on, at. That's why we're actually going to say in last year. 작년에. Okay, 작년에. Does that make sense? I'm sorry. Actually, it should be in blue, right? Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? Okay. And also, when it comes to pronunciation, now, what you see is not always what you get, right? There are always all sorts of variables. What happened to this? I'm sorry. So there's a PDF file that consists of 162 pages, right? Yeah, it took a long time for me to write it. Yeah, I actually wanted to keep on going, but I felt like if I keep adding information, I would never finish it, and it would be 3,000 pages. Okay, but anyway, yes, it lays out all the rules and variables that you have to know in order to save you from situations where you would be confused because what you see is not what you get sometimes. Okay, so if you go to page 30 in that PDF file, yes, once again, it showed, for example, we're looking at the consonants, but also there are variables with vowels, right? Okay, so the G sometimes sounds like G, K, and NG, right? So when does it sound like NG? Yes, I didn't give it a snappy, I'm sorry, a G sound or a snappy K sound. I'm sorry, actually, I didn't write NG here. I'm giving it an NG sound. Why is that? Because when the G is in front of N, L, or M, in these three cases, yes, it will sound like NG, NG. Okay, so right now it's in front of N. So right now, yes, I'm going to give it an NG sound, just like when you say like thing. I'm not going to make it sound like G, like thig, or like a snappy K sound, like thick. No, I'm going to make it sound like 작년에. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? Yes, according to official orthography, this vowel and also this vowel can both be written as e or e. Now, usually, textbooks usually go with e, but according to official orthography, both are recognized as ways you can write them. But usually, textbooks goes with just one e. Okay, so 작년에, I'm sorry, yeah, okay, 작년에, in last year. Okay, and then move. Okay, so now we did talk about move, but because we talked about the concept of ambitransitive verbs a couple of times, so we always take steps, right? So today let's actually unlock an extra layer to the verb move. The verb move was a little bit tricky, right? Because it's an ambitransitive verb. Okay. So let's go through it one more time because move is actually going to have an extra layer. So what is an ambitransitive verb? So if you have a verb, usually there are two types of verbs, right? There are intransitive verbs and there are transitive verbs. Okay, so, well, let's try to tell basically the same story, but using two different verbs. Once again, always the example that I use, right? Now, what I basically want to say is, now one of us, there are two people, one of us had to go here to do something. This is the coordinate, the spot. Someone has to go here to do something. Now, I'm super lazy. I didn't want to go. So he did. Okay. So I didn't want to go. I'm super lazy. So I had him go. I didn't want to go, so he went. Okay, so I can basically tell the same story by using an intransitive verb. He went. He goes. Let's say he goes. Yeah, whenever someone has to go, yeah, always he goes. I never go. I'm lazy. So I always have him go, so he goes. Okay, now go is an intransitive verb. Why is that? Because it can only modify the subject. In other words, in English, a word to its left, the subject. Okay, but I can basically tell the same story by saying, I send him. I never go. I have him go. Now this is a verb that modifies the object. In other words, a word to its right in English. So intransitive verbs, transitive verbs. Okay, so in both cases, I'm basically conveying the same message, but just in a different way. In one way using an intransitive verb, in one way using a transitive verb. Okay, so whenever we go into these, let's say, boring rules, the so-called boring rules, one could ask a very fundamental question, which is, why do we have to know this? If I see a verb, I know what it means, I know how to use it. Aren't we being too pedantic just to learn boring rules for the sake of learning boring rules? Well, I would say if you're going to stay in a very rudimentary state, like just saying, I like coffee, I like summer. Yes, if you are looking to stay there on that level, well, maybe you can ignore these rules. However, there comes a point where it becomes important, right? Okay, so when it becomes important is when you have an ambitransitive verb. Now, this is when it becomes a little bit tricky, doesn't it? Isn't it? What is an ambitransitive verb? A verb that can do both, that can be used to modify the subject and also to modify the object. Well, for example, there are a whole bunch of cases, right? Change. I can say, the date changed. Or I can say, I changed the date. Or maybe hide. I can say, I hide in the kitchen. Okay, whenever I want to, like, jump scare my friend. Or I hid my friend's phone in the kitchen. Okay, so change, hide, freeze, melt, wake up, calm down, sink, boil, dry, all of those would be ambitransitive verbs. So in Korean, whenever you have an ambitransitive verbs, it means that you have to know both versions, right? What does change look like when you are having it modify a subject? What does change look like when you're having it modify an object? For example, 바뀌다 in this case. Of course, the display form of change, we cannot use it as it is, right? But anyway, the display form would be 바뀌다. And in this case, 바꾸다. Okay, hide, 숨다, 숨기다. Okay, so when you have an ambitransitive verb, it actually becomes important to know whether, yes, I'm using it to modify the subject. In other words, am I using it as an intransitive verb? Or am I using it to modify the object? In other words, am I using it as a transitive verb? So yes, my answer to the question, do we have to know this? Well, I would say, well, you do at some point. Okay, now, move. Of course, the reason why we are talking about this concept again is because we have an ambitransitive verb in move. Okay, so move, of course, 움직이다 and 옮기다. Okay, but once again, I said outside of all the ambitransitive verbs, move can be a little bit extra tricky because, so that means if I'm going to say I move. So yeah, I'm going to say 움직이다 because once again, what is moving? The subject is moving. But if I'm going to say I moved the table, let's say this table right here that you're looking at, let's say I don't like it being here, so I moved it somewhere else. I moved the table, then it's 옮기다. Okay, so yeah, that is what we are talking about. However, move, what makes move a little bit extra tricky is the fact that, let's say, what if I'm going to say I move my legs? Let's say someone says, I want to know how to swim. I can't swim. Can you please tell me what I'm doing wrong? And let's say I'm going to say, well, I'm not an expert either. So all I can say is, I think you're not using your legs. I think the only difference between you and me is, you and I is, I move my legs. That's it. Okay, so now in this case, you could say, yeah, because move is modifying the object, a word to its right. Now, should I use 옮기다? Okay, now, usually, that's all you have to know whenever you have, usually, other ambitransitive verbs. But I said there's something that makes move a little bit extra tricky. Okay, so in this case, even though it is being used as a transitive verb, I'm going to use 움직이다. So that's what makes move extra tricky. Why is that? So when you're using move as a transitive verb to modify the object, still you have to think about an extra factor, which is the whole thing moving, completely moving, or at least is there a pivot that is not moving? So what I mean by that is, let's say, there's a table here. I didn't like it being here, so I moved the table to here. So I moved the table. Yes, in this case, because it's a transitive verb, I'm going to use 옮기다 as move. Because, yes, I'm using it as a transitive verb, and also, if I'm gonna move the table, there is no one part of the table that is going to be the pivot and not move. No, the whole thing moves. Okay, however, what if I'm moving my legs? Yes, let's say underwater. So we're talking about how to swim. So I'm moving my legs nonstop. Okay, so yes, this part of my legs move, but actually, let's talk about this part, close to my hip. Now there's a pivot that does not move, right? Yes, my thighs, my shin, my calf, my ankle, yes, those parts are moving, but the part that is attached to my body, upper body, like my hips, that part is being the pivot so that it doesn't completely move. For example, if my leg just falls off and just goes here, I'm sorry, it might be a little bit disturbing. Now, in that case, it's 움직이다. But once again, when you're using move, even when you are using it as a transitive verb, always keep in mind, is there at least a pivot that does not move? If that's the case, you still have to use 움직이다. Okay, so move is extra tricky. Does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? 계속할까요? Should we continue? Okay, so once again, to sum things up, yes, if you're using it as an intransitive verb, use 움직이다 when you're using it to modify the subject. If you're using move as a transitive verb, as a way of modifying the object, you still have to ask yourself one extra question. Okay, whatever I am moving, the object is moving. Is it completely moving from one spot to another? Or is it that a part is moving and there's at least a pivot that is not moving? If it's the latter, yes, even though you are using it as a transitive verb, you still have to use 움직이다. Okay, so if you say, once again, if someone says, hey, I can't swim. I want to know how to swim. So you can swim. Can you please break down the difference between what I'm doing and what you're doing? What am I doing wrong? And I'm going to say, well, I'm not an expert either. So all I can say is I move my legs. It seems like you're not moving your legs. Okay, so let's say what happens if I use the wrong version? Let's say I said I 옮기다 my legs. Okay, now it's creepy, right? Well, are there sharks in here? How did your leg completely get detached and completely move? Okay, so now my friend is going to say, well, if that's what takes to swim, I don't want to swim then. Okay, I have to like lose my legs to swim? That's not a smart trade-off. So yeah, I'll just not swim. I like my legs. I'll just walk. Okay, so always keep in mind, yes, you have to know exactly which version to use. Okay, so right now, oh, I'm sorry. So that's what makes move a little bit extra tricky. Now, once again, let's actually make it even more trickier because move is extra tricky. So yeah, we talked about when to use 움직이다 and when to use 옮기다. Let's just add just one more element to it. You don't use any of these versions when you are talking about moving where you live. Okay, so I moved from Korea to Japan. That's 이사하다. Okay, so when you're talking about changing your address, changing where you live, that's 이사하다. That's completely off topic. It's not about intransitive or transitive. Okay, so 이사하다. So actually, this is the version of move that we need today. It's just that I went through all of this to get here. Okay, so that's why I always say when you're learning Korean, I always say look for the if, ands, or buts. Yes, it's annoying, but you should look for it. If someone says, how do I say move in Korean? Well, 움직이다, goodbye. No, you have to say that's too simple to be true. You always have to ask yourself the question, yeah, I know what I'm saying. What version of it am I saying though? Am I using the transitive version? Intransitive version? What are we moving? Am I moving? Am I moving the table? Or am I moving from Korea to Japan? Okay, so 이사하다. Okay, so yes, if you're newly joining and you need some catching up to do, well, you can go to our YouTube channel or check out the PDF files that lay out the curriculum. If you go to my TikTok bio, you'll see the links. Okay, thank you, Sparkles. Okay, so actually the version of move is 이사하다. Okay, but I don't want its display form. I don't want the ta ending. Why is that? Because the ta ending, the display form ending, means nothing, therefore it does nothing. Okay, so I want an ending that actually has a grammatical function or attribute. Right now, the but ending. Okay, so the but ending is a shapeshifter, right? Shapeshifter, an irregular ending. Okay, so what is an irregular ending? An ending that keeps on shapeshifting according to two factors usually. Is it going to a verb, adjective, or noun? And what's the tense? Okay, so yes, we have a PDF file that lays out, well, not all of them, part 1, the most useful ones. PDF file that lays out irregular endings, shapeshifters, right? So those who have it, you can go to page number 3 and it will be all laid out. Okay, so right now we need verb past tense, right? Okay. So it'll look different depending on where it goes. Yes, right now we're saying I moved. So move is a verb and moved in past tense. Yes, in that case it's going to be double S 는데 and belongs to inflection route number 1. Okay, double S 는데. Okay, so because it belongs to inflection route number 1, let's go to inflection route number 1 to go get the ending then. Yes, so all the PDF files are available if you go to my TikTok bio. Okay, now, once again, we know the ending we want and also the fact that it belongs to inflection route number 1, which means that we will apply the rules of inflection route number 1. And we know exactly what to do, right? Technically breaking things down instead of just saying feel the language. That's our bread and butter. That's our bread and butter. Exactly. So remove 다, change 하 into 해, and then 드디어, finally, you can attach the ending. Of course, if I was in inflection route number 2, the rules would have been different, right? Okay, so remove 다, change 하 into 해, and then attach the ending. So a version of but when you're giving it to a verb in past tense. So of course I'm not going to give the H an H sound. It's going to be practically silent because it's somewhere in the middle of a word, not at the very start. And once again, yes, this S, it does sound like a snappy T when it's in front of a consonant. Yes, that is true. However, that is not the case when that consonant happens to be an N or M, right? Those are the exceptions. If the S is in front of an N or M, then it also sounds like N. Okay, so that's why in this case, because the S is in front of N, I am not going to give it an S sound, and I'm not going to give it a T sound either. It's just going to sound like N. Therefore, it'll sound like I'm just saying two N's in a row consecutively. So, 이사했는데, 이사했는데, 이사했는데. So moved, but. Okay. Oops. So now, oops, yeah, I forgot that it's going to be a long sentence. We might not have enough space, so I'll just write down the meaning. Moved, but. Okay. Now, yes, an H in the middle. Thank you, Sparkles. Okay, so. Now, it's not technically and of course legally wrong to pronounce an H that is somewhere in the middle, but it will sound like this. It will feel like this. Let's say, my friend asks me a question. Hey, are you going to go tomorrow? Are you going to go to the party? And let's say I'm just completely ignoring him. Okay, so now let's say my friend says, hey, why aren't you answering me? And I'm going to say, yeah, because I didn't hear I am going to. So does that make sense? So it could be, let's say, a little bit annoying, right? I mean, of course, you do make mistakes when you're learning a new language. But if someone says, no, I refuse to answer you if I don't hear, unless I hear I am going to. I heard I'm gonna, so I'm not gonna answer you. So yes, if you are very fixated on the idea that because there's an H, I will go out of my way to clearly enunciate it, well, that's what it could feel like. Okay, so 작년에 이사했는데, and then, yes, of course, no it, no is, and then the adverb still, and then the predicative adjective confusing. Okay, so of course, we have to know at least 3 versions of still, right? Oops, I'm sorry. Okay, so which version of still are you going to use? So, let's pick and choose. Yes, are you going to use method number 1, I'm sorry, version number 1, 아직, or 아직도? Of course, there's a nuance difference between the two. 그래도 and 가만히. They can be all translated into still, right? Okay, so yes, in order to meticulously understand the difference between the 3, we're going to attach a keyword to each of them, right? 아직 or 아직도 is duration of time. When you're simply talking about duration of time, 3 hours I was full, 3 hours later I am still full. Okay, 그래도 is when you're using still to indicate that a factor does not greatly influence or affect the other. In other words, a little trick is see if you can change still into regardless according to the context. If you can, then you need version number 2. But those aren't the only reasons why you would say still in English, right? You can also say still when you're simply indicating absence of movement. When you're saying don't move, stay still. In that case, it's 가만히. But once again, no H sound. Okay, so usually it's very clear cut whether I should use 1, 2, or 3. But sometimes you do end up in situations where it feels like 1 and 2 both work. And usually, yeah, that might be the case. You're not wrong. In that case, it's more, yeah, it depends on what kind of a nuance do you want to emphasize more? Are you more focused on the time that has passed, the duration of time that has passed, or the fact that there's a factor and it's not greatly influencing the other? Okay, so in this case, we're saying 작년에 이사했는데, 작년에 이사했는데. So B is basically saying, yeah, I'm still confused about my own address because I moved last year. So I moved last year, so some time has passed, so I should know it by now, but I'm still confused. It's still confusing to me. Okay, so in this case, B can use both because B can be focusing on the amount of time that has passed, or B could be saying something like, regardless of the fact that a lot of, yeah, it's been a while, it's last year, it's not this year. Regardless of that, I still get confused. So sometimes you might run into situations where you feel like both work. Okay, so in that case, once again, it depends on what you want to emphasize more. So, are you going to emphasize the fact that, regardless of the fact that I usually should know it by now, because let's say I think I have decent memory, so regardless of the fact that I should usually, it's something that I usually would have gotten memorized by now, it's still confusing. Is that what you want to emphasize more? Or are you going to emphasize the amount of time that has passed more? It's been 3 months, 4 months, and it's still confusing. So, number one, duration of time. Number two, when you are indicating that a factor does not greatly affect the other. In other words, when you can change still into regardless. Okay, so once again, we are looking at a situation where it feels like both can work. But a lot of times, no, it's very, very clear cut, right? For example, let's say I'm waiting for a friend. Well, this is an example that I always use, right? So I'm waiting for a friend. He should have been here by 3. Let's say it's 3:20. So I call him and I'm saying, hey, I'm here waiting. Yeah, are you almost here? And my friend says, oh, I'm sorry. Heavy traffic. So my friend says, give me 10 more minutes. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Okay, so I give him 15 minutes, let's say, or 30 minutes. He's still not here. So I'm going to call him again and I'm going to say, yeah. Are you almost here now? And my friend says, oh my God, heavy traffic. I'm still on my way. I'm sorry. I'm still on my way. Now, in that case, I used still. I cannot change still into regardless, right? If my friend says, I'm on my way regardless, that would be very confusing to me. Because I'm going to say, regardless of what? Of course you should be on your way. What do you mean regardless? So in that case, we cannot use method number 2. I'm just simply talking about duration of time. I'm saying, I'm sorry. Yes, 20 minutes ago when you called me, I was on my way. 20 minutes later, yeah, I'm still on my way. I'm still not there. It's taking a long time. I'm sorry. So in this case, I should use method number 1, right? Does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? Okay. So, yeah, don't use method number 2, and of course, don't use method number 3. Now that doesn't even make any sense, right? Because if my friend says, yeah, I'm still on my way, well, this still means you're not moving. So I'm going to say, aren't those two kind of mutually exclusive? How can you not move and be on your way? Are you saying you're coming or are you saying you're not coming? Okay, so always you have to pick and choose the right version according to the context. Okay, and version number 1, yeah, if you add the extra to here, yes, once again, it makes it spicier, right? It imbues the nuance of frustration or surprise. Okay, number 3, 가만히. 가만히. So, yeah, right now, I'm not going to use method number 2. I could have, but I'm going to use method number 1. I'm going to be focusing on the duration of time. So let's say it's June. So let's just say it's June. So when B says last year, yeah, it at least has been 6 months. 6 months and it's still confusing. So I'm focused on duration of time. Okay, so I'm going to use 아직. And yes, I can't say 아직. Let's say B is just saying, oh yeah, I moved last year, but I guess it's still confusing to me. I guess I'm still confused. But if B wants to sound frustrated by it, by saying, "Oh my God, when am I going to memorize it? I'm still confused. Come on, it's been 6 months." So if B wants to sound frustrated, he could have added the extra syllable, 도, 아직도. So we could have done that, but for today, let's just say B is not necessarily trying to sound frustrated. He's just saying it. Okay, so 작년에 이사했는데 아직 and then confusing, 헷갈리다. Let me push it to the left a little bit. Oh, we spent a whole bunch of time here. Let's speed things up. I'm sure that a lot of you have things to do, so responsibilities to take care of. Oh, I'm sorry. 헷갈리다. Okay, so of course I don't want a display form. I don't want the ta ending. I just simply want its actual form, present tense ending. So that ending, the yo ending, belongs to inflection route number 1, right? So let's go to inflection route number 1. Okay, so yes, we have a situation where the display form that we are using ends with the e vowel, right? 헷갈리다. So in this case, we know what to do, right? If we are in inflection route number 1, and we are, which we are because of the yo ending, we're going to apply a 3-step formula, right? Remove 다, change e into 여, and then 드디어 attach the ending. Okay, so 헷갈려요. Okay, so 헷갈려요. 헷갈려요. Okay, so now we have the actual form present tense of confusing, which is confusing. Exactly, yes, exactly. Still confusing. Okay, now we have the whole 문장. 천천히 읽을게요. 작년에 이사했는데 아직 헷갈려요. 작년에 이사했는데 아직 헷갈려요. 작년에 이사했는데 아직 헷갈려요. Okay, so once again, in Korean, you still need in, right? Even if you're saying last year. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Sorry, TikTok is asking me to verify myself that I'm not a robot. Okay. Now let's move on. Let's speed up a little bit. So A is going to finally say something. 드디어 say something. Okay, so now A is going to say, yes, I'm not a robot. Okay, so now A is going to say, by the way. Yeah, speaking of moving, by the way. Why did you move? Okay, so A is going to ask B, hey, by the way, why did you move again? Okay, so now when you're saying using the adverbial phrase by the way, okay, so it's going to have the properties of an adverb in the sense that it doesn't do anything by on its own. It's there to usually help the verb, predicative adjective, or subject complement. Anyway, yes, so it's going to be a phrase that has adverb properties. So an adverbial phrase. Anyway, so there are in large 2 ways of saying by the way. The best ways, of course, there are a lot of poetic traps, but the 2 best ways is to say, use an interjection, 참, What is an interjection? A grammatical component that does not have a literal meaning that will be translated into a word, but rather a grammatical component that is just simply used to express spontaneous feeling, like the O's, the A's in English. Okay, so you can either use 참 or you can use 근데. Okay, so once again, you always have to know exactly what a word is doing, right? 근데 can be a version of but. It can be a version of and. It can be a version of then too, right? And it can also be a way of saying by the way. Okay. A version of but, a version of and, a version of then, and a version of by the way. Today we're going to focus on the fourth, right? 혹시 would be by any chance. By any chance. In this case, I don't think A would say by any chance. Why did you move? Right? So 혹시 would be closer to by any chance. By the way would be 참 or 근데. Okay, so of course there's a nuance difference between the two. If you're saying 참, now it gives off the nuance that, yeah, something just came to mind right now completely spontaneously. You weren't thinking about it before, and there was no contextual buildup that led you to talk about it. It's just completely spontaneous. 참. So for example, let's say me and my friend were just having pizza, and yeah, just completely out of nowhere, I'm gonna say, oh, 참. Did you buy those green shoes that you were talking about 3 months ago? So completely spontaneous. We weren't talking about anything that is related to it, and there was no, yes, and I wasn't thinking about it either. I was not thinking about the fact that I will at some point bring this up. No, completely spontaneous. 근데 on the other hand, yes, makes it sound like either you were thinking about it in advance. Yes, we are talking about topic A right now, but at some point I'm going to bring up B today. It was my plan. Or at least we were talking about something that is related to it. So I naturally just, yeah, happened to talk about it. So completely spontaneous, not completely spontaneous. So right now I'm going to use 근데 because it's not completely spontaneous. We were talking about moving. B just said, I moved last year, but it's still confusing, my address. Okay, so I'm going to use 근데. Does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? Okay. 근데, by the way. By the way. And then, yes, we have the adverb why and placing did in a question sentence that already has a verb as an auxiliary verb is not something that you would do, right? So we're going to take it away. But if we take it away, well then now nothing is indicating past tense. So the verb will do it itself, right? And of course I'm talking to you. You said you moved. Okay, so now 이사하다. I'm sorry. The version of move that you would use when you're indicating that, yeah, you were living in one place and also the other. Okay, so 이사하다, 이사하다. So now 이사하다, take a look at it. Is it just a verb or is it a very specific type of a verb? Yeah, you can sometimes just use it as a filler word, but yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We'll talk about it in the future. Exactly. It's a do noun verb. So how do we know that? Because it ends with 하다. Okay, yes. So if you see a verb that ends with hada, usually outside of very, very, very rare exceptions, it means that you have a do noun verb. What is a do noun verb? A verb that became a verb through a simple mechanism of just taking a noun and attaching do to it. So for example, 노래하다, sing. It's a do noun verb, which means that it came from the noun song and do. Also, 사과하다, apologize. So it means that it came from the noun apology, 사과, and do, 하다. Okay, so once again, we aren't just learning these rules for the sake of learning rules, right? No, there are 3 situations in which you have to know whether the verb you're using is just a verb or a do noun verb, right? And one of those situations are when you have an adverb. Yes, if you have a do noun verb, you can split open the two, right? Split open the two. And now the noun becomes an object. 이사. Just like when you say, I like coffee. Okay, so like coffee. So just like, now do is playing the role of a verb on its own, alone. So now this is just a noun, moving. So just like when you say, I like coffee, do moving. Okay, so let's just call it moving. And then, yes, now because I split it open because so that I can slide the adverb in between, that's what I'm gonna do. Sorry, let's have it all colored. So once again, when you have an adverb and you have a do noun verb, what you can do is you can split open the do noun verb into two, into just a noun and do as the verb alone, and you can have the adverb slide in between. 이사, 왜, why, a version of why, and then 하다. So 하다, do alone, is the verb now. But anyway, I don't want its display form, do I? I don't want the ta ending. I want the actual form past tense ending because I got rid of did. Okay, so let's go to inflection route number 1 to go get the actual form present tense ending. Okay, so once again, we know exactly what to do. We are in inflection route number 1 because of the ending that we're using, and the display form ends with the ha syllable once ta is removed. Exactly, I'm sorry, just hata. Okay, so remove ta, change ha into he. Yes, and then to the o, attach the ending. So now I have the actual form past tense of do, which is did. 했어요, did. Okay. Okay, 했어요. Now briefly, let's talk about do noun verbs just a little bit more. So I said there are 3 reasons why you have to split open the do noun verb into 2 parts, the do part and the noun part, right? And actually, the adverb, just normal adverbs, that was reason number 2. Now, reason number 1 and 3, if you are in one of those situations, you have to do it. There are no if, ands, or buts about it. You have to. However, with just normal adverbs, I said you can do it, which means that you don't have to do it. So that means that I had 2 options when it comes to the placement of y. It means that I could have placed it here. I didn't have to split open the 2 and have it come in between. I could have just placed it here. So if I decided to put it here instead of here, what am I doing? Am I just doing that? I'm not, right? I'm taking into consideration the general theme of Korean grammar, which is the later it appears, the more important it is. So if I could have placed it here, but I decided to place it here, it means that I want to emphasize it more. So if I place it here, it sounds like, by the way, why did you move? If I place it here, now it sounds like, by the way, why? Why did you move? Yeah. Why did you move? I thought that you liked your old place. Why did you move? Okay, so a lot of more emphasis, a lot of more spotlight on it. Okay, so B, now we have the whole 문장. So A is going to say, 근데 이사 왜 했어요? 근데 이사 왜 했어요? 근데 이사 왜 했어요? Okay, does that make sense? If it does, sorry about that. If it does, 넘어갈까요? Yes. Yeah, why he moved is not a part of today's story, unfortunately. I'll leave that to your imaginations. Okay? So, we have the whole 문장 cliffhanger, yes. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have the whole 대화, conversation. So at first, 천천히 읽을게요. 정보가 일치하지 않습니다. The computer says that. So B is going to say, 작년에 이사했는데 아직 헷갈려요. 근데 이사 왜 했어요? With more 속도, speed, 정보가 일치하지 않습니다. 작년에 이사했는데 아직 헷갈려요. 근데 이사 왜 했어요? With extra 속도, 정보가 일치하지 않습니다. 작년에 이사했는데 아직 헷갈려요. 근데 이사 왜 했어요?